in the closet. I never believed in ghosts. Monsters under the bed, figures lurking in the dark, just childhood nightmares. I told my son, Ryan, the same thing every night when he refused to sleep. "There's nothing in the closet, sweetheart," I'd say, flicking on the light, sliding the wooden doors open, and showing him nothing but hanging clothes and a pile of toys. He'd nod, but his little hands still clutched his blanket too tight, his wide eyes darting toward the dark corners of the room. At first, I chalked it up to an overactive imagination. Kids see shadows where there are none, hear whispers in the hum of the night. But after weeks of the same routine, his trembling voice telling me someone was watching from inside, his refusal to sleep unless I checked, I started feeling uneasy myself. There was something about the way he said it. Not like a child trying to stall bedtime, not like a game. Like he really, truly believed it. One night, after another long day of work, I was too exhausted to argue. "All right," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Let's prove once and for all that there's no one in there." I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the closet, intending to show him the empty space. But when I glanced at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. A face. Small, pale, barely visible in the shadowed depths between the hanging coats. The features were indistinct, blurred as if peering from behind something, behind reality itself. I turned my head quickly toward the closet, expecting to see, what? A trick of the light? A toy reflecting strangely? But there was nothing. Just clothes swaying slightly, as if I'd disturbed the air inside. I forced a laugh, though my throat felt tight. "Just a weird glitch," I muttered, deleting the photo before Ryan could see it. "Go to sleep, sweetheart." He didn't argue this time. He just pulled the blanket over his head. That night, I dreamed of whispering. The whispering in my dream was soft at first, almost soothing, like the rustling of wind through leaves, but the longer I listened, the more it felt wrong, words that didn't form properly, syllables that twisted and curled, stretching in ways a human voice shouldn't. I stood in Ryan's bedroom, staring at the open closet, its interior impossibly dark, as if it had swallowed the light. Something shifted inside, a slow, deliberate movement, and then, just as I stepped closer, a small hand, pale and thin, reached out from between the coats. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was silent except for the soft hum of Ryan's nightlight. I turned my head toward his bed, relieved to see the small lump of his sleeping form beneath the blanket. My nerves settled, and I exhaled slowly, trying to shake the lingering unease from the nightmare. Just a dream. A stupid, meaningless dream. But my fingers trembled slightly as I pulled the covers up, and I had to fight the urge to get up and check the closet myself. Morning came with the usual rush, preparing breakfast, packing Ryan's school bag, reminding him to put on his shoes properly instead of hopping around with one untied. By the time I dropped him off and drove to work, the events of the night before felt distant, ridiculous even, like the remnants of a half-remembered horror movie. But that feeling of unease crept back as soon as I returned home in the evening. It was in the way the house felt different, like the air was heavier somehow, pressing down on my shoulders. It was in the way Ryan hesitated at his bedroom door when I told him to get ready for bed, his small fingers gripping the frame tightly, as if stepping inside meant stepping into something dangerous. I tried to shake it off, tried to be the rational adult, but I couldn't stop thinking about that photo, the one I deleted without really looking at it long enough. I had dismissed it too quickly, told myself it was nothing before I could even process what I had seen. That night, after Ryan had finally fallen asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, debating with myself. It was stupid, pointless. But something gnawed at me, a deep, nagging itch in the back of my mind, the kind that doesn't go away no matter how much you tell yourself to forget about it. Before I could talk myself out of it, I stood up, walked quietly to Ryan's room, and opened the closet doors. The faint scent of fabric softener and old wood drifted out, familiar and unthreatening. The light from the hallway barely reached inside, leaving deep shadows between the hanging coats and toy bins stacked against the wall. I lifted my phone and took another picture. When I looked at the screen, my breath hitched. The face was there again. Clearer this time. closer. A child's face, round and pale, with wide, unblinking eyes staring directly at me from the darkness. The mouth was slightly open, not in a smile, not in a frown, just open. Like it was about to speak. I turned on the closet light so fast my fingers fumbled against the switch, heart pounding against my ribs, but there was nothing there. Just coats, just toys, just the same closet I had checked 100 times before. But the image was still on my screen, the face still there, still looking at me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, exhaustion clung to me like a damp sheet, making every movement sluggish, every thought sluggish, but I forced myself through the motions, coffee, breakfast, making sure Ryan brushed his teeth properly and didn't just stand there staring into the mirror like he sometimes did when he was still half asleep. I told myself that what I had seen in the photo was a trick of light, an anomaly, something my tired mind had conjured out of the messy shadows of the closet, but I didn't quite believe it. I didn't delete the picture this time. It sat there in my phone, waiting, a cold weight in my pocket that I was too afraid to look at again yet too afraid to get rid of. At work, I found myself checking my phone more often than usual, my fingers itching to open the image again, but I resisted. If I looked at it again, I would start questioning everything, and if I started questioning everything, I wouldn't be able to stop. Instead, I tried to focus on the mundane details of the day, the emails, the meetings, the small talk with coworkers that I barely heard because my mind kept circling back to Ryan's closet, to the strange heaviness in his room, to the way he had stared at the closet door last night before whispering, almost too softly for me to hear, "He doesn't like it when you take pictures." I had brushed it off in the moment, had told myself that he was just playing one of his little imagination games, but now, sitting in the break room with my untouched coffee growing cold in front of me, I couldn't push the words away. He doesn't like it when you take pictures. He. Not it. Not a monster. Not a ghost. He. By the time I picked Ryan up from school, a dull headache had settled behind my eyes, and I was ready to chalk everything up to stress, to exhaustion, to the simple fact that I was a single mother with too much on my plate and not enough sleep. But then Ryan did something that sent a sharp, icy spike through my spine, something so small, so simple, but so deeply, instinctively wrong that I nearly slammed on the brakes in the middle of the road. He hummed. Not a tune, not a song he had learned from school or TV, just a strange, lilting hum that rose and fell in a pattern that felt too deliberate, too old, like something ancient and forgotten was being stirred awake by the sound. It was the same tone I had heard in my dream, the same slow, curling rhythm, and when I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, my stomach clenched. He wasn't looking out the window or at his hands the way he usually did when he was lost in thought. He was staring straight ahead, wide-eyed and unmoving, like he wasn't really there at all. I forced my voice to stay light, casual. "That's a new song, bud. Where'd you learn it?" His lips barely moved when he answered. I didn't. The words hit me like a slap, too flat, too empty, too wrong, but I forced a laugh, reaching over to ruffle his hair, even though my fingers felt stiff and cold against his scalp. "Well, it's kinda creepy. Maybe stick to the songs from music class, yeah." Ryan didn't respond. He just blinked, slowly, and turned to look out the window again, the humming fading away into silence, leaving behind a hollow, ringing absence that made my skin crawl. That night, I didn't open the closet. I didn't take another picture. But I didn't sleep either. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house made my muscles tense, every shift of shadows sent my mind spiraling into paranoia, and when, just past 3 in the morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of Ryan's closet door creaking open, I squeezed my eyes shut and willed myself to not look. Because if I did, I wasn't sure what I would see. I wasn't imagining things. The realization settled into my bones like ice, spreading from my chest outward, locking my limbs into place. I wanted to tell myself that the sound I had just heard, the slow, measured breath emerging from the darkness of the closet, was nothing more than my mind playing tricks on me, that the weight pressing against my ribs was just exhaustion wrapping itself too tightly around my thoughts, distorting them into fear. But I couldn't. Because it was real. The air in the room had changed, thickening into something almost tangible, something unseen yet undeniably present. It coiled around me, pressing against my skin, seeping into my lungs, and making every breath feel like an effort. I tried to move, to turn away, to reassure Ryan that everything was fine, but my body refused to listen. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab my son and get as far away as possible, yet I couldn't seem to force myself to break the stillness that had settled over us, a fragile balance I felt certain would shatter if I made the wrong move. Ryan hadn't shifted beneath his blanket, hadn't so much as blinked. His fingers still clutched the fabric in a death grip, his knuckles pale, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as if looking anywhere else would bring something terrible into focus. The silence between us stretched, a suffocating pause filled only by the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, too fast, too loud, like a drum warning of something approaching. But nothing moved. The closet door remained as it was, barely ajar, revealing only a sliver of darkness beyond. And yet, the sensation of being watched, of something lurking just beyond sight, had never been stronger. I had never felt anything like it, never felt such a raw, paralyzing certainty that I was not alone in that room. My fingers twitched at my sides, the only part of me that seemed capable of movement, but I didn't know what to do with them. Did I reach for Ryan? Did I turn on the light? Did I close the closet door, despite his warning, despite the fear woven into his voice when he had begged me not to? Every option felt wrong, every possible action carrying its own weight of consequences I wasn't ready to face. But I couldn't stand there forever, caught in the tension between logic and the primal terror gnawing at the edges of my mind. Swallowing hard, I forced myself to take a breath, to make a decision, to push through the ice that had settled into my spine. My voice, when it finally came, was weaker than I wanted it to be, cracking around the edges. "Ryan, sweetheart, it's okay. I promise." The words felt empty the second they left my mouth, a meaningless attempt at comfort that neither of us believed. Still, I forced my legs to move, slow and careful, as I made my way back to his bed, as I eased myself down onto the mattress beside him, feeling the tremble in his small frame when I reached out and smoothed a hand over his hair. He was shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper, something I could feel humming just beneath his skin. I wanted to tell him again that everything was fine, that there was nothing to be afraid of, but the lie lodged itself in my throat, refusing to come out. The closet remained open. The darkness inside it remained still. And yet, something had changed. The breath I had heard before, soft, deliberate, unmistakably real, hadn't come again. But I knew, with every nerve in my body screaming the truth at me, that it was still in there. Watching. Waiting. I kept my hand on Ryan's head, feeling the damp warmth of his skin, the way his hair clung slightly to his forehead. His small body still trembled beneath my touch, and I knew there were no words I could offer that would make it stop. A child's fear should be something easy to dispel, something I could chase away with logic and warmth, with reassurances that the world wasn't as cruel or as strange as it sometimes seemed in the dark. But this fear, his fear, was rooted too deeply, wrapped around his bones like something planted long before tonight. It wasn't just an overactive imagination or the echoes of a bad dream. I could feel it in the way his breath hitched unevenly, in the way he refused to look toward the closet even as my presence should have reassured him. He was terrified, and now, so was I. The air felt heavier than before, like something unseen had crept closer, like the act of acknowledging it had given it permission to lean in, to settle against my skin, to listen. The closet door had not moved, yet I could not shake the sensation that the darkness beyond it had shifted in some imperceptible way, like it had thickened, become denser, as if something within it had drawn closer to the threshold. The breath I had heard was gone, but the weight of that presence remained, pressing against me with an insistence that I could no longer ignore. I reached for my phone. My fingers fumbled slightly as I unlocked the screen, trying to focus, trying to act like I was still in control of this moment, like I wasn't unraveling beneath the growing certainty that we were not alone in this room. The flashlight app flared to life with a cold, artificial glow, casting harsh shadows along the walls, stretching them into unnatural shapes that seemed to move in the periphery of my vision. I forced myself to turn toward the closet, raising the phone just enough to let the light spill into the open sliver of space between the door and the frame. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the familiar clutter inside. Ryan's clothes hanging limp on their hangers, his shoes stacked neatly on the floor, a few scattered toys shoved into the corners. Nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. Ryan's breath hitched, sharp and sudden. My grip on the phone tightened instinctively as I turned back to him, expecting to see his wide, fearful eyes staring at the closet. But he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at me. His expression had changed, the pure, childlike terror replaced by something colder, something more distant. His lips parted slightly, and I thought he might speak, but he didn't. He just stared at me, unblinking, his small hands still clutching the blanket so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. The silence stretched between us, pressing into my ears, into my ribs, into the space between my heartbeats. Then, in the softest whisper, barely audible over the buzzing static in my mind, he said, "Mom, why do you have someone behind you?" The world tilted. My stomach dropped so fast that for a moment, I felt like I might be sick. My breath caught, and my muscles locked in place, every instinct screaming at me not to turn around, not to look. But the weight of that unseen presence pressed in closer, colder, and the light from my phone trembled against the walls as my grip turned unsteady. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to know what was waiting in the shadows just beyond my vision. But I had to. I had to. With every ounce of willpower I had left, I turned my head, slowly, painfully, toward the dark reflection in the vanity mirror across the room. The light from my phone barely reached that far, leaving most of the glass shrouded in shadow. But there, just over my shoulder, barely visible in the dim glow, a face. Small. Pale. Eyes too wide, mouth slightly open as if caught mid-breath. Staring. Staring at me. I spun so fast that the phone nearly slipped from my grasp, the flashlight beam swinging wildly across the room, illuminating nothing but empty air. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, my pulse hammering so violently that I could feel it in my throat. My mind scrambled for an explanation, for something rational, something that made sense. A trick of the light. A distortion in the mirror. A nightmare I hadn't woken up from. But then Ryan whispered again, voice trembling, voice small. "He's still there, Mom." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to laugh it off, to say something dismissive, to be the adult in the room, the one who soothed, the one who explained away the shadows, the one who wasn't paralyzed by the creeping certainty that he was right. But the words wouldn't come. My throat felt tight, locked around the truth I didn't want to admit, the truth that was pressing in closer, settling against my back like a cold breath I couldn't quite feel but knew was there. I swallowed hard and forced my limbs to move, gripping the phone tighter as I turned back to the mirror. The light caught the edge of my own reflection first, my pale, strained face, my wide, bloodshot eyes, but my gaze was drawn past it, beyond my shoulder, into the dark corner where the glow barely reached. At first, I thought it was gone. A trick of the mind, a shadow misplaced. But then, movement. Subtle, almost imperceptible, a shift in the blackness just behind me, where no one should be standing. My breath caught as the outline sharpened, small, childlike, motionless except for the slow, shallow rise and fall of its chest. The details swam into focus, the same round cheeks, the same wide, unblinking eyes, the same slightly open mouth as if caught mid-whisper. A child, no older than Ryan. A reflection that shouldn't exist. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body had locked up completely, my muscles frozen in place as my mind scrambled against the impossible. My own reflection remained rigid, breath hitching, shoulders trembling, but the boy behind me, he moved. Just a fraction, just a tilt of the head, but it was enough to send an electric spike of terror down my spine. It was real. It was real. Ryan whimpered. The sound snapped me back, sent ice shooting through my veins as my brain overrode the paralysis. We had to get out. I didn't care if it was a hallucination, if my exhausted mind was warping the shapes of the shadows, if there was a rational explanation waiting just out of reach. Ryan was terrified. I was terrified. And something was standing behind me. I grabbed him, yanking him up from the bed with such force that he let out a startled cry, his small fingers tangling in my shirt as I half-carried, half-dragged him toward the door. The phone shook violently in my grip, the light bouncing wildly against the walls, throwing twisting, lunging shadows in every direction. Don't look. Don't look at the mirror. Don't look behind you. Just move. The moment we crossed the threshold into the hallway, the air changed. The weight, the pressure, the suffocating heaviness that had been clinging to the room vanished. The fear in my chest didn't dissipate, but the oppressive presence, whatever had been lurking there, was no longer pressing against my back. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I kept moving, practically running down the hall, my grip on Ryan so tight I could feel the rapid, frightened thud of his heartbeat against my arm. We didn't stop until we reached the living room. The lights were still on from earlier, washing everything in their normal, harmless glow. I set Ryan down on the couch, dropping to my knees in front of him, hands gripping his arms, forcing myself to look at him, to focus on him. His face was pale, streaked with tears, his chest heaving with uneven breaths, but he was here, safe. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady my own trembling hands, trying to piece together what the hell had just happened. Ryan swallowed hard, his lower lip trembling. His voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "Mom, he's still in the closet." A fresh wave of ice flooded my veins. My breath came too fast, my hands clutching his arms just a little too tightly. I wanted to tell him no, that we had left that room behind, that whatever he thought he saw was gone. But I knew better. Even now, sitting in the warm glow of the living room, I could feel it, the faintest pull in the back of my mind, an awareness that something had been left open. A door that should have been closed. I forced myself to release Ryan, running a shaking hand through my hair as I tried to think. Call someone? Who? What the hell would I even say? That there was a ghost in my son's closet? That I had seen a reflection that shouldn't exist? That my child, my flesh and blood, had been terrified of something that I now knew was real? No. There was no one to call. No one who would understand. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't just leave it. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it, before the rational part of my mind could shove this moment into the you imagine it box and pretend everything was fine. Ryan grabbed my wrist, his tiny fingers cold, desperate. "Mom, please don't go back in there." I looked down at him, at the pure, unfiltered fear in his face, and something inside me nearly broke. But I had to. I had to know. I bent down, pressing a quick kiss to his forehead, my own heart breaking at the way he clung to me, at the way his breath shuddered in his chest. "Stay here," I murmured. "Don't move. I'll be right back." I turned before he could beg me again, before my own terror could root me in place. The hallway felt longer this time, stretching in that strange, dreamlike way where everything feels wrong, like the walls have grown taller, the air thicker, the shadows deeper. The bedroom door was still open, the darkness inside waiting. I stepped inside. The silence wrapped around me instantly, too heavy, too thick. The air was stagnant, untouched, watching. My pulse roared in my ears as I lifted the phone again, turning the light toward the closet. The door was still ajar, exactly how we had left it. I swallowed. One step. Then another. The distance between me and that sliver of darkness shrank with agonizing slowness, my breath hitching, my fingers trembling as I reached out and yanked the door wide open. Nothing. Clothes, shoes, shadows pooling in the corners. My breath came out in a rush, half relief, half doubt. But then, on pure impulse, on a desperate, reckless need for confirmation, I did something I would regret for the rest of my life. I lifted the phone and took a picture. The flash burst, bright and blinding. I lowered the phone, heart hammering, thumb already moving to open the gallery. Please be empty. Please just be empty. The photo loaded. My stomach dropped. In the corner, barely visible in the back of the closet, just beyond where the light had reached. A face. Small. Pale. Eyes too wide, mouth slightly open as if caught mid-breath. staring at me. The phone slipped from my hands. Behind me, the closet door slammed shut.